Chris Mannix now joins us from Sports Illustrated. Where do you start, Chris, with the blame game?
Well, I think you mentioned the injury to Jason Tatum, and that was obviously a factor early on. He was never the same after that first play, and I thought Jaylen Brown took it upon himself a little bit too much to compensate for Jason Tatum's absence or lack of play out there. I do agree with you that, you know, for the second straight game, they have been catastrophically bad shooting the three. I think the Game 6 was the worst three-point shooting playoff game they've had. This game was the second worst three-point shooting game that they've had. And I thought too many times during this game, you know, they were looking for like the 8-point shot. Like they were looking at that one shot that would get them back into the game, tie the game, and that just wasn't there. And I wasn't tracking this specifically, but it certainly felt like every time the Celtics took an ill-advised shot, Miami responded with a bucket. So it really was, in the matter of 10, 15 seconds, these 4- and 5-point swings that were absolutely crippling to the Celtics.
You look at, we mentioned Miami, and there's been a lot of debate about them. You know, they take down the Bucks, they take down the Celtics, they take down the Knicks. Now, how do you assess this team that the Celtics went down zip 3-2 to force a Game 7? Are we just not giving them enough credit?
Look, they're as mentally tough as they come. You know, I was talking to Kevin Love in the locker room just a few minutes ago, and he was saying, like, he and Udonis Haslem, they often sit next to each other on these bus rides, and during challenging times, they talk about what this team might need to have said to them to, you know, give it a little bit extra push, but that, you know, going to the arena today, they said they needed nothing. Like, this team was just locked in, you know, getting on that plane, you know, after Game 6. So, you know, whatever talent disparity there is, and there certainly is one with Miami, they make up for it with just mental toughness and mental fortitude and just a style of play that's just really difficult and disciplined for teams to match up with.
All right, Chris, what are the ramifications of this loss? Is this the kind of loss? I'm talking about the series loss, okay? It's not just a Game 7 loss. I'm talking about losing to a team that's far less talented than you. What are the ramifications of that going into the offseason?
You know, it's bitterly disappointing, Mike, but I do not expect there to be any kind of seismic changes with this roster this offseason. I still fully expect the Celtics to make Jaylen Brown a max-level offer, and I expect him to ultimately sign it because, quite frankly, players don't turn down those types of offers. I think the most significant changes will come on the coaching staff of Joe Mazzulla. I do think there'll be one or two assistants that decide to depart and join Ime Udoka in Houston. And I think that Mazzulla, who had really no opportunity to handpick guys on his own staff, will get the chance to do that. I would expect a guy like Stephen Silas, the former head coach in Houston, to be a top candidate to be on Joe Mazzulla's bench. There are others out there that I'm sure will come under consideration. But I think the only real changes will come on the coaching staff, not from the roster.
And back to that coaching staff, do you get the sense that, you know, Brad Stevens was on board with Mazzulla? Let's say they got swept. Was Mazzulla coming back regardless?
You know, I've always believed, Mike, that there's been and there is a measure of loyalty between Brad Stevens and Joe Mazzulla. He is the closest thing that Brad has to a protege. Now, there may have been some pressure from above Brad Stevens to maybe make a change if this team had gotten swept in this series. But the fact they went to 7 games, the fact that Jason Tatum was hurt on the first offensive play the Celtics had, I think these are enough mitigating circumstances for even the most cynical Joe Mazzulla, critic to at least give him another chance with a full coaching staff next year.
All right, Chris, let's again reconsider Brown Tatum. Because that supermax money now, that's no joke. You know, we're talking over $500 million for two guys, $600 million for Brown and Tatum. And if they're going to do that for two guys who have been to one final, have no championships, and the second of which couldn't pick up the slack when the first of which got hurt, I'm not as convinced as you are that Wyc Grousbeck is going to say, yeah, I'm all in for that.
I don't know what your option, though, is, Mike, because trading Jaylen Brown at this point is not going to yield the kind of return that you're hoping for, because a team is probably not going to give up a lot for a player that may walk at the end of the year. I mean, it just doesn't make much logical sense. I will say this. You talk about the money that's going to be committed to Brown and Tatum. It's a lot of money, but it's not unheard of across the NBA for teams to commit this type of cash to unproven players. And the Denver Nuggets, who the Celtics would have faced in the finals, are kind of proof of that. I mean, Nikola Jokic had never been past the conference finals. He's got a max contract. Michael Porter Jr. was given a close to max contract a couple of years ago. Jamal Murray is on a max or a close to max contract. So giving this type of money up to players in today's NBA is certainly not unheard of. And it doesn't make someone like Jaylen Brown untradeable down the line if you do decide to go a different direction.